Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this webinar to the launch of the Cities for CEDAW campaign globally that we co-organize with our friends from Cities for CEDAW History and Futures Project, the Geneva Human Rights Hub, and the Human Rights Cities Network. Just a few housekeeping matters before we start. Just to let you know, the event is being recorded. It will be made available on our website afterwards. We will proceed in English only, but you can see at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's translated captioning available so that you may follow the meeting in your preferred language. And then, of course, don't hesitate to use the Q&A on your Zoom to raise questions and make comments. We'll keep it to 1 hour sharp so that, we don't drift away with our attention. My name is Antu Duong. I'm the co-director of the Global Cities Club. For those who don't know us yet, we pursue 2 objectives. The first one is to connect cities and regions to the United Nations and other international organizations to enhance the influence of cities and regions at the international level. To do so, we encourage international organizations, but also states, to work more with cities and regions and vice versa. And our second objective is to promote the urban on the agenda of the international community, because we all know it, our future is urban. And we want the international community to better consider urbanization as a phenomenon in its work. By 2050, we know that nearly 70% of the world population will be living in cities in urban areas. Women and girls represent half of the world's population. So cities have a choice to make. Either be places of safety, opportunity, and inclusion, where the society can thrive as a whole, or be spaces of discrimination, where opportunities are missed every day. Of course, we all know what the right choice is, and we believe the CEDAW Convention, the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, provides a good roadmap for cities and regions worldwide to get there. Several local and regional governments have done it in the United States of America, adopting and enforcing CEDAW, the convention, at municipal level to improve the lives of women and girls at the local level. Over decades, many United States cities, counties, states have done it, and we'll hear from one of them today with the Los Angeles County. But now the goal is to really go global. Last week, Cardiff in Wales, in the UK, was the first city in Europe to become a city for CEDAW and to adopt CEDAW at the local level. And last year, 7 states in Nigeria have also decided to advance gender-sensitive urban policies based on CEDAW international standards. So today we're launching this global campaign. We do so with partners, but also with a short brief that is available on our GCH website, and I'll try to show it to you. This short document should help you understand what that means to adopt CEDAW at the local level. What are the concrete measures that you as a city, a province, a county, a subnational state can take to advance gender equality and combat discrimination on your territory? So for this webinar, I'm very proud that we have fantastic speakers with us today, and I'll introduce them as they speak. And we'll start with Esther Egobamian-Michelia. Are you here with us, Esther? Yes, you are.
Yes, I am. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you well. Esther, you are an expert on gender and women's rights. You are currently the vice chair of the CEDAW committee, a committee that examines the implementation of that CEDAW convention by states party. I have 2 simple questions to you, yet complicated to answer in a short amount of time. What is CEDAW, the convention, and why is it relevant to local and regional governments? And you've got 5 minutes, Esther. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm gonna shut down my video because the network isn't steady at all at my end, so please bear with me. For many who may not know, CEDAW is the really the only internationally binding treaty that protects women's rights. It was ratified it was adopted in 1979, ratified, in 1981. And to date, we have 189 state parties to the convention. It has over 430 articles, and it defines discrimination against women, sets binding obligations for states on how to eliminate discrimination, and also creates an international monitoring system, making it the most comprehensive human rights instrument for women's equality. As at today, it is a firm catalyst for growth. And for those who may not be very familiar with the procedures of the committee, we convene dialogues with state parties who report periodically, and we examine the progress against the articles of the convention. And key articles of the convention that are applicable to women's rights at different levels are Articles 2 on non-discrimination and state obligations, Articles 3 and 5 on equality and dignity, including protection against violence, Articles 7 and 8 on political and public participation, Article 11 on employment and economic rights, and Article 13 on economic benefits and social life, and in the course of its work, the committee has actually articulated a number of general recommendations to elaborate why and how they could better deliver on their CEDAW obligations. Relevant is Article 36 on the right of women and girls to education, and Article 40 on parity in leadership. In the course of our work, as at September 2023, the committee working with the OHCHR had an event examining CEDAW within the context of local and regional governments. By February of 2024, the committee had an engagement with the Cities for CEDAW and Futures project, reviewing their 10-year progress in actually trying to drive the Cities for CEDAW within the US. By 2025, as you rightly said, Nigeria became the first country globally working with the Cities and Future project to roll out City for CEDAW as a global model and a global mechanism. This year at the CSW 70, and immediately following, we had the launch of the first city in Europe by Cardiff, which was really very, very inspiring. Why do we need? What are the lessons we've learned that others may need to know from our dialogue with Samoa, Spain, Mauritania, the Czech Republic, as well as the Global Cities and Future project, is that there's limited CEDAW knowledge among local officials. There's no or little local redress mechanisms for discriminatory practices and violation of the convention at the grassroots level by municipal governments and by regional governments. There's weak dissemination of the committee recommendations, which is actually pointers for what the state party needs to do among state party members. And there's insufficient resources and capacities in local government departments, and unclear gender mainstreaming responsibility and budgets remains a persistent challenge. In the future, we believe that engaging CEDAW using the Ganri lens will create a direct engagement model, and we can see we've already started with a few countries, Nigeria, Cardiff in the UK, adopt CEDAW local ordinances. We have the San Francisco model, build local redress mechanisms and gender-based violence safe spaces, mainstream gender across all local government departments, and partner with women's CSOs and the private sector to actually address gender disparities. And so for us as a committee, we see local governments as the greatest theater of rights violation and discrimination in the light of their duty bearer role and regulator role, their service provider role, their peace and security anchor instruments, and their political grooming grounds that they provide to all. And so we believe that working with cities and local governments, we have the opportunity to deepen and cascade the implementation of the convention to grassroots level so that we can have a bigger outreach to more women and then enhance prosperity within cities and local governments. Key takeaways to your question. CEDAW, it remains a legal binding instrument that creates an architecture for gender equality and a sound business environment. Adopting a local CEDAW ordinance in your municipality is the first step in embracing CEDAW as a global model, as a model. Engaging women CSOs and the private sector is key, and then deploying gender parity remains one of the key economic multiplier indicators that we have found in our work as a committee. Thank you very much, Anne.
Fantastic, Esther. You stick to the 5 minutes, but your intervention was very rich with a lot of information there. I hope we can share your presentation afterwards so that people have a better idea and are able to digest all the information you provided. But what we retain, of course, is that there's willingness on the part of the CEDAW to work better with local and regional governments to help them better implement CEDAW at the local level, which has somehow been identified as a gap so far in terms of gender equality implementation. We'll most probably get back to that, hopefully in the discussion. Let's move on now to the next speaker. I'd like to invite Chanel Smith so that we can hear from the Los Angeles County in the US, one of the local governments that pioneered the implementation of CEDAW at the local level. Chanel, you've been working for the past 15 years on gender-based violence, homelessness, human trafficking, including as the executive director of the Los Angeles Women's and Girl Initiative. You have also worked for the LA Mayor's office, and therefore you have a very good experience in terms of working for local and regional administrations. So we'd like to know, because we've heard that you have indeed adopted CEDAW at the local level, how has your county implemented the provisions of CEDAW at your local level? What has been the impact there? Because we have a bit of distance, I believe. And what were the obstacles that you met on the way? You have the floor, Chanel.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys so much for having me. Just to put LA County in a bit of context, kind of on the global level. So we have a population of about 11 million in our county. Our budget for the county is about $54 billion. And we have a workforce of about 150,000. So we are the size of many countries. In 2022, as you mentioned, we adopted the CEDAW ordinance. And shortly after that, we began implementation. So what that looked like for LA County is that we have a gender impact assessment that we trained our 39 county departments on. We have one additional county department that will be being trained this current upcoming fiscal year. And all of those departments had to come up with 5-year goals that addressed their workforce, their leadership, and their community services or their outreach. So what that looked like is that we had about a $1.7 million budget for the Women and Girls Initiative. We brought on Caroline Torin, who was a phenomenal consultant and who continues to work with LA County. She did capacity building with all of those 39 county departments. So really teaching them how to look at their work through a gender lens. We were able to continue that project. So we will continue to have those analysis of those goals from those departments over the next 5 years. We also attached them to our performance evaluation. So for LA County, they're called MAP. So all of our department heads who are overseeing those, all of those departments that I mentioned, how it is that they are implementing their gender equity goals is actually a part of their performance evaluations. So their monetary compensation is attached to how well that they are doing on their gender equity goals, in addition to kind of other county priorities. And then you asked about challenges. So some of the challenges that we faced, one, as everybody knows, when you've got kind of competing political priorities, you really have to be able to look at how it is that you can institutionalize this work. So for us, attaching it to the MAP process or those performance evaluations, like I mentioned, that for us was really a way to be able to institutionalize, as well as the capacity building by training all of those departments and letting them come up with their own goals. So our departments range vastly, right? We have, like I said, a workforce of 150,000 people. And so it really didn't make sense for us to mandate what those gender equity goals were going to look like for each department. So we were able to have them look at their own work. And it's been really, I think, inspiring to be able to see the vast range of goals that those departments have come up with. For just to give you a little bit of context, some of the themes that we are seeing overall amongst our kind of vast workforce is the desire to strengthen data. So data collection on women, girls, and gender non-binary folks, enhancing community engagement, analyzing our community services. So the services that we're providing to the members or those 11 million people that I said are living in our county. And expanding career pathways for women and girls. We are in the fourth year of our implementation now. And so now all of our departments have been trained. We just put out a report that analyzed our 2024 and 2025 goals, which we will be happy to send to you all. But we're really excited to be able to see kind of how this continues to grow. And how we're able to impact the lives of all of the women and girls and men. Our particular gender impact assessment is there's a focus on women and girls, but we do have some departments that are not serving men and boys fully to their capacity. And so looking at how it is that we can be able to serve them, because as we know, we have, mixed gendered households. And if we're really going to uplift our citizens, we have to look at them holistically. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chanel. Very impressed by your work. I really kind of, have impressed. I'm impressed because you mentioned like keywords that I'd like to repeat here: workforce, leadership, community services, and with a gender lens. I think that is very concrete for any municipal administration looking at how to, better protect the rights of women and girls. The key word here is really institutionalization, and you have managed to do it very well through the performance process. The fact that also all the different counties came up with their own goals, it means that you provided them with ownership, and I think that's very important as well. So these are very concrete measures. We'd be very glad to receive your report so that we can share with other interested cities and regions worldwide how you've done it and what kind of challenges you've met, but also what kind of solutions you came up with. So thanks so much for providing all those information in a very short amount of time. Again, we'll move on closer to the European continent. We have Jackie Jones normally with us. Is Jackie? Yes, you are here with us, Jackie. Thanks for being here. Jackie, you are a professor of international law, international human rights law. You've been dealing with women, girls, equality issue for the past decades. And in 2018, you left the academia to become a politician, both at the European level, but also at the very local level. And you're now a city councillor of Cardiff. It's been mentioned in the beginning by Esther. Cardiff has become the first city in Europe to become a city for CEDAW, and you've been instrumental in the whole process leading to that result. So how did you manage to get there? What were the core arguments that you used to convince your city colleagues to adopt CEDAW at the local level and to institutionalize it? And we're coming back to the issue of institutionalization, like in the LA County. Tell us also what will be the concrete measures that the city of Cardiff will take as a result of becoming the first city for CEDAW on the European continent. You have the floor, Jackie. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Ang, for the invitation to speak. I'm absolutely delighted and honoured to be here. Prynnawn da, as we say in Welsh here. And Cardiff is a small city. It's about 350,000, maybe 400,000 when people from the valleys come in daily to work. So it's nothing like LA County. So what you're getting is different perspectives here as well to the different type of cities that may want to develop this further. It's an exciting initiative. I've worked in this field, as you said, for a number of years, but this is about embedding human rights locally and what we can do at a very localized level, because we then can do it bespoke to where we are. So in the council, our journey is very simple. I just want to make 7 points, if that's okay. First of all, we had it in our Cardiff manifesto. I'm a Labour politician. We run the council. We've run it for 2 administrations. We won the 3rd administration. And in the manifesto in 2022, we committed to becoming a city for CEDAW within 2 years of running the administration. And in fact, we did that within a year. We passed a motion in 2023. Similar to an ordinance, it's a legally binding document. It's a resolution that we pass in council. Now, that's the politics part. You obviously have to have political will and leadership in order to pass a motion. And that's where the behind the scenes political maneuvering needs to take place, but politicians are used to that. It's about values and demonstrating those values in a motion. So how we did that is, in the UK, we've got existing legal duties around gender equality, but not only that, anti-racism, pro-disabled people, and all sorts of what we call protected characteristics under the Equality Act 2010. And we pushed those within the motion and used an integrated approach in order to have the policy direction and the values that we wanted to pursue in Cardiff to make Cardiff the best place possible for citizens to live. Everyone has to be there. Everyone has to have access. So that's what we did. And in fact, voters voted in their droves for us. I know that sounds very dramatic, but 55 seats out of 79, that's pretty good record. So it's a vote winner as well. In March, so in that motion, we integrated it with, as I said, with protected characteristics, but we had some clear goals in it as well. We put the idea about having CEDAW cascade into the corporate plan, which meant that it had to be throughout our policies and our practices. So, for example, just 2 examples here. We mentioned the workforce in it to include diversity and inclusion targets for all of the workforces, to include training for all of the workforces, including frontline staff. So those who are front-facing the community and our citizens, and not just back office either. We also included the pay gap, of course, and pension gap, and making sure that we target that, but intersectionally as well. So it's about, a disabled Black woman having, not narrowing that pay gap or that pension gap. So making sure that we targeted the citizens that are in our city. And of course, we also mentioned, there's lots of things. Similarly to LA County, we did an awful lot of things, but GBV as well, gender-based violence strategy. We made sure that CEDAW and all of the general recommendations that have come out of the CEDAW committee and the cases, etc., are reflected within the gender-based violence strategy. But we also mentioned girls, because girls are part of the CEDAW convention. And it's very important that we have a booklet of rights that goes into what we call hubs. So that's like libraries, etc., and into schools. And we mention what CEDAW is and what their rights are, because it's quite an extensive convention that will really enable equality and diversity within a city or within a country or within the globe. And it will make us much more economically active, as well, as Esther was saying, and we might come back to that point in the end. Civil society was 100% behind the initiative. And I'd love to extend an invitation to you in 2 years' time, Esther, and hopefully Nala and others, and Jessica and Sunyun and yourself and whoever would like to come. We're going to be reassessing how we're doing in 2 years' time. So you're all very welcome to come to Cardiff. And hopefully by that time, we won't be the only city. We'll be one amongst millions of cities in Europe and across the globe. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jackie. And we take on your call, and we hopefully will be there in 2 years' time to assess basically how you've been doing with the CEDAW, and what are the obstacles that you will meet on the way. But thanks a lot for providing us with a good, idea about the measures that you're taking, capacity building, education, targeting the right people. Of course, the question about workforce, and I think it's been mentioned by previous speakers, the fact that you have civil society behind you is really important, and to make sure that your movement also has roots in the population. We very much on time. It's amazing. All those not speak like for like hours, but just stick to their time. We're coming back to you, Sun Young. Thank you so much for being here with you. I have to confess that all of this started with you. Actually, it was your initiative to really start talking about cities for CEDAW. So after hearing about what is CEDAW, why it is relevant for local and regional governments, as well as hearing from two very different cities and regions, how CEDAW is relevant to them, let's move to you. And Sun Young, you are a very well-known women's rights advocate with a very long international career in several UN agencies working on women's rights. You're also the founder and the co-director of the Cities for CEDAW History and Futures project, with whom we have been partnering. So now that we've heard about all of the, different elements of the Cities for CEDAW, if I were a city or region, what kind of resources you would have to provide me so that I may want to know what should I do to join the campaign? What is the role of the CEDAW History and Futures project role? What does joining that campaign entail? You have the floor, Sun Young.
That is, of course, the toughest question. I think it's really exciting. You should know, all of you, that you are now part of American history, oddly enough. Our project documents the history of the campaign as it started in 2014. And we are trying to look at different case studies, the data, the narratives, the objectives, in order to be able to glean from those some of the innovative approaches and some of the sort of common standards, or how shall I say, strategies, common strategies for everyone, whether you're beginning, just starting to think about it, or if you are, as in the case of LA County and Cardiff and other jurisdictions, pretty far along in your implementation. So our project began in 2014 when the NGO Committee on the Status of Women New York, which convenes the NGO forum around the UN Commission on the Status of Women, formally launched the campaign in the US. We focused on the US because, as you may know, the US is the only industrialized country which is actually not ratified. Yet in 1998, San Francisco adopted CEDAW as a city ordinance and began to implement that. That was some time ago. So in this period of time since the campaign was launched, we've been able to document more than 60, we would have almost 62 cities, counties, and states that have adopted CEDAW as a law or its principles, covering more than 82 million Americans. Our smallest jurisdiction is actually a population of 6,000 in Granville, Ohio, and probably the largest one is LA County. It's spreading as a grassroots campaign using local funds and adapting CEDAW to very different principles. So if I could have the next slide, what I wanted to emphasize here is that there is an innovation and creativity that is peering from the campaign, which means that we can't really give you, even from our data, a single formula for success. What we can give you are examples of the diversity of approaches and a few things that we see across all of the jurisdictions. First, it's really important to have this baseline data. If you're just starting, it could be possibly funded actually by academics. In some cases, we find that law schools helped or women's studies departments helped, and that baseline data was very important for being able to argue for the adoption. And of course, the continual monitoring and evaluation systems, if those can be institutionalized, that is, of course, the ideal. In some cases, then, you actually have it institutionalized into the city or county budget. And actually, one of the strongest ordinances we have in the US was Washington, D.C., which included all of the requirements for gender budgeting across all the departments and regular reporting. So then the question is, reporting to who? Reporting to who? If you are not far along and already have institutionalized, you may begin with something like voluntary women's commissions, which is what we sometimes have. It could be also a Department of Gender Equality, or in the US, it would be a DEI, Department of Diversity and Inclusion, or it could even be the mayor's office. So the third point I wanted to make is to make sure that we invest in time and resources in public outreach, and that the wide diversity of leadership and those impacted by CEDAW are also engaged in the campaign. This helps to guarantee policy know-how among those who are affected, so when changes or challenges arise, one can have a wide-reaching, popular and very diverse support. And it would certainly be a mistake for women's groups to organize without enlisting champions inside government. This is an interesting development that we see, is that women's groups sometimes start outside and then challenge the city. That probably is the least successful approach. So as Krishanti Demiraj, who was the architect of San Francisco's legislation in 1998, has advised, she says, women's groups must know the inner politics of government, and that is the smartest strategy. Identify the champions of your cause and influencers of other city council or county supervisors. But the city also needs to keep its pulse on the public opinion and on coalition leaders so that the goals align continually. So the other thing I wanted to, if you could show the next slide. So you can measure some progress by numbers, and there can be political achievements that are invisible, but well done over time. There is a shift in social norms and political culture. And once these become influential, they can stimulate the motivation of city and civic leaders, government employees, as we saw in some examples, police, service providers, so that everyone is making better decisions. And this political cultural shift, I think, is probably one of the most interesting things that we see happening with the localization of CEDAW. And finally, what I wanted to remind us all is that the UN is a supportive mechanism. Of course, the Global City Hub is a wonderful liaison with the UN system. We have worked a lot with UN Habitat at the World Urban Forums that helps advocate for us this localization of women's human rights with sustainable development goals. This summer, during the UN High-Level Political Forum in New York, many local authorities will make these, what we call the VLRs, which are the voluntary local reports on SDG 11, which is on cities, SDG 5 on gender, and of course, all the others related to climate change and biodiversity, water, and partnerships. So I have to say that one of the most interesting VLRs that I have read recently was actually from Amman, Jordan. So you can imagine yourself as city or county or other jurisdiction participating, even virtually, in the UN High-Level Political Forum. And I think it's really an interesting idea for cities to begin contributing to national CEDAW reports, highlighting to your national governments the challenges as well as the opportunities offered by the localization of CEDAW. And the final thing I wanted to bring to you is what we wanted to leave with you are some websites, easily accessible in English, unfortunately, but we really are attempting to reach out with the information that we have. You have here some training materials as well. We have a Cities for CEDAW YouTube channel with about 20 or 25 different examples of coalition building and training examples as well. So here you have the citiesforcedaw.org. You also have a group called CEDAW Rising, which has been assembling the different jurisdictions together annually at the Commission on the Status of Women, and they have monthly meetings as well. You will find there also other documents, examples of ordinances, which you could look at, US. And finally, of course, we welcome you to contact us, the citiesforcedaw@gmail.com, for any questions you have. And that is probably my offering to everyone who is there. The last thing I wanted to leave with you is this thought. I think that the grassroots movements that we see here are thriving, they're creating, they're diverse, they're finding different solutions and approaches, but they really thrive when there is vertical integration, when there is finally an institutionalization and financial support at all the different levels, all the way up to the national level. And ultimately, I think our goal is to build a country, one community at a time, where women and girls in all their diversity can be respected and thrive in safe and healthy environments. And if you use this email, you will also probably reach my co-director, Jessica Pearson, who is also going to join us later to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simeon. Fantastic. And there's so many things that you have addressed that I would like to highlight here. In particular, the methodology that you have provided us with in terms of how basically it works to join, the campaign to become a city for CEDAW, to institutionalize the gender equality in budget, the question of reporting, and of course, highlighting that this is a political process at the end of the day. We need to have political leaders supporting that question and who are brave enough to bring it in front of their city council or provincial council, whatever, in order to really take the issue of gender equality at the center of a particular city or region. Really also welcome the fact that you have mentioned how interesting it was for cities and regions to contribute to the national reports of their respective central authorities, be it for voluntary national reviews on the Sustainable Development Goals that are being presented by states each year at the UN, the United Nations in New York, or, as you mentioned, of course, the CEDAW national reports that are then submitted to the CEDAW committee, of which Esther is the vice chair. So there are many, many reporting obligations for states, and it is very interesting that cities and regions are starting to think about it and to contribute to that. We at the Global Cities Hub have in the past also worked on the Universal Periodic Review, where we have invited local and regional governments to provide input into that human rights peer review process. Thank you for that. Now we have plenty of time for questions. We have plenty of time for questions because we're done with the panel, but I wanted to start, before opening up the Q&A, I wanted to give the floor to Marshall Wanibo from the Human Rights Cities Network, who's been partnering with us on this campaign. You are the project coordinator of Decide, which is an initiative involving municipalities and also NGOs to co-create human rights indicators and monitoring tools. And I'd like to know, actually, it would be very interesting to connect the dots and see to what extent you have also worked on gender equality in the framework of that project. So, Marshall, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. I'll basically start by something that Jackie mentioned, and she asked, how do we embed human rights locally? And listening to some of the examples that she mentioned, I think some of these examples could be turned into indicators that measure change at the local level. And at the Human Rights Cities Network, we believe that we cannot be able to measure what is happening to women and girls in our cities and at the local level because if we cannot measure it, we cannot change it. And that's precisely the point of the DECIDE project. The DECIDE project is a 2-year project that is funded by the European Union. And we are working with 9 diverse European municipalities, closely with their civil society partners. And working alongside them is also our partnering organization, the Global Parliament of Mayors. And in this DECIDE project, we are co-creating a standardized monitoring system for human rights in European cities. And we are developing the standardized monitoring system in partnership with the municipalities and the CSOs. And at the heart of the DECIDE project is the standardized monitoring system that is built on 10 human rights indicators that is validated through a participatory process with the cities and anchored in the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, where we are focusing on 3 key areas, which is the access to social and cultural services, right to non-discrimination, right to vote, and democratic participation. And what makes our system so important is basically that rather than just counting activities with regard to how many participants or how many workshops are organized, our monitoring system looks to actually measure the real change, measure shift in people's lives, and most importantly, the women in our cities. And with this monitoring system, we have a structured tool that basically tracks progress across all factors because data collected from one city that is part of the DECIDE project can be able to be compared with data collected in another city. And in DECIDE, gender is embedded as a cross-cutting dimension where we capture data regarding access to services for vulnerable groups, including women and girls facing intersecting forms of discrimination. We also track representation and participation in civic life, measuring whether local policies are actually reaching who needs them the most. And out of our 9 validated indicators, 8 are disaggregated by gender. And what do I mean by disaggregation is that data collection has to define the number of women and girls impacted by the local interventions. So as an example, one of our indicators measures the first-time participation in youth assemblies as a result of municipal campaigns. And the indicator not only ensures that the municipal awareness campaigns are increasing participation of youth in decision-making, but by disaggregating it by gender, local governments are able to determine the number of women in these youth assemblies and ensure that their policies are able to increase the number of women included and represented in decision-making. And this is exactly what CEDAW demands for states. I mean, I think CEDAW asks, are women's rights being realized in practice? And by monitoring, you're able to have the tool to be able to answer this question. And cities joining the CEDAW campaign, I mean, need exactly this kind of monitoring tool that is embedded in their local context because without a structured, gender-sensitive data collection method, commitments will just remain declarations. But with monitoring, cities can be able to report, compare, and also improve and also be held accountable in their local practices. And I think if CEDAW is the roadmap of how human rights and women's rights should be embedded, I think having a monitoring system is how, as a city, you're moving forward. So I think I would basically also finish by saying, as cities represented here today, if you're embedding CEDAW at the local level, you need to also reflect what are you measuring and basically for whom. And yes, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Marshall. Very interesting to learn about other initiatives that have very similar goals. And indeed, you do respond to one of the speaker, I think it was Chanel that mentioned, Chanel or Jackie, who mentioned the need to collect baseline data in order to basically see how you improve. So definitely what you have been developing is definitely useful for any cities or region that would want to join that campaign and to basically see how they manage to shift the landscape in terms of women's and girls' rights. I think Jackie Jones, you wanted to add something. Am I correct, Jackie? If that's the case, you have the floor.
Yeah, only if we don't have a question.
Please
That's all.
go ahead. I'll have questions afterwards, but please go ahead.
Thank you for that, Marshall, as well. And we do monitor in Cardiff, and we've got legislation to do with that, but we can always do it better and in different areas. It's an evolving thing, isn't it? We have to evolve with what we're actually doing and programs are being rolled out. But what I wanted to say is I completely forgot to mention the big conference that we had last week, where Esther was there and Sun Young was there and Jessica were there to celebrate and commemorate being the first city for CEDAW in Cardiff, but also 40th year of the ratification of CEDAW in the UK. It's 45 years old, the convention, but 40 years old. Under Margaret Thatcher's government, believe it or not, she ratified it. And I just wanted to mention that we had input from all of these wonderful women in particular, but we had leaders from several different local authorities who gave their input as well. And Swansea, which is the next city down from Cardiff, is a human rights city as well. So that might be something, Marshall, you might want to reach out to Swansea, and I can get you in touch with them as well. They're very, very proud of being a human rights city, and the only one, I think, in the UK, I believe. Yeah. But thank you for indulging me.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to that, I think that would be such a great opportunity. I think the Decide project has been a pilot project and involving all these cities. They are from different geographical settings, different cultural settings, and working together with building this standardized monitoring system has actually brought about various insights which are helpful in terms of the project. And once the findings come out, I think it will be published on our website, and also we'll share with CEDAW so that we can be able to share these findings together.
Thank you so much. I can see there are several questions on the Q&A. Thank you to Jessica for responding to them live. I think there's another question to you, Jackie, in the chat. I would encourage you to have a look at it from Glasgow. And please, Esther, you have the floor. I think you wanted to add something.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anne, and really delighted to hear all of the good works that's happening. Congratulations, Decide, on your effort and the monitoring indicators that you've put together. I can't congratulate Cardiff more, and of course, the Cities for CEDAW project for how far they've come. However, I just thought it pertinent to point out, a little dimension that the Cities for CEDAW project brings to bear is the issue of local laws, is to have legal obligations cascaded down to the grassroots in a locally binding law. Because what we find is a lot of issues around with gender mainstreaming and gender equality and implementation of the convention remains at the advocacy level. And so with the shifting government and when the political winds change, renegotiation starts again. And I think Cardiff is a very good example. LA is a good example. I believe Nigeria will be one once all of the laws are in place. Having the local ordinances really is a critical feature of the Cities for CEDAW initiative, because there are monitoring indicators out there, but compliance has been extremely difficult. The local ordinances bring human rights to the doorstep of local communities so that accountability can actually be can be pursued within the ambit and the mandate and the authority of local administrations. That added dimension is really what makes the Cities for CEDAW a very good initiative. And of course, partnering with you would just amplify that. If we were to have local laws within those Decide pilot cities that then have ordinances, edicts, or bylaws that will be applicable and justiciable. And that's where CEDAW comes to play. And then it can be reported to the committee. Just thought to flag that. But thank you for the good work. I really congratulate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. And it brings me to one question that I had to, I think, both Jackie and Chanel. You are in a very different context, with one in the US, where the US have not ratified CEDAW, and where the UK has ratified CEDAW. So how is your relationship as a county, a city that engages for CEDAW adopts local ordinances, as just mentioned by Esther, and have like kind of binding obligation at the local level, how do you relate with your national authority? And maybe Chanel, if you want to start first, just the relationship with the US federal authorities on that one, if there are any.
That's a very good question. We do not currently have any. Our federal government has, I think, different priorities than our local government does right now. And so when, as Esther mentioned, kind of when political wills change, that looks different. Under our previous administration, we actually had a lot of interaction with our federal government. Under this current one, we don't. But depending on kind of the way that our local ordinance is set up and the way that our implementation is, we are able to continue to do the work that we are doing, regardless of who it is that is sitting in our federal office, and kind of regardless of what their priorities are. But yes, currently we do not have any interaction with our federal government, but that has certainly changed over the last couple of years.
And hopefully it will change again. Jackie.
Thank you. Yeah, very, very much so, or like that. So we're a dualist country, which means that we have to pass law in the UK Parliament in order for international law, in order for it to be integrated into our legal system, and that hasn't happened. We've ratified it, but we haven't passed a law like the Human Rights Act, for example, which domesticates the European Convention on Human Rights. So yes, we have ratified, and we are obligated to fulfill our CEDAW obligations at state level, at local level as well. So public institutions. However, if you try to rely on CEDAW before a court here, that would be problematic. So we're in this sort of hybrid situation, and putting it into a local ordinance or resolution or motion means that we've got a firm basis to monitor, as well as hold legally to account our local council and what they do. Because we also have other legislation, which is the Equality Act, which has certain protected characteristics, which means LGBT, disabled people, etc. That is in our legislation as well. So we've got what I would call a net or a web of legislation that we had. We used to have EU legislation, of course, as well. We don't have that anymore, but we've got Council of Europe, we've got UN, Council of Europe, UK, and then Wales as well has its own equality part legislation as well. Complicated.
Yes, but that makes your action on CEDAW at the local level very concrete then, because as you said,
yes.
Then you can municipal council account. Question to Esther. Are you still with us, Esther?
I am. Yes, I'm
yes,
here.
Esther. There's a question here in the room about how the CEDAW, as the committee, how can you assist cities, basically? Could you use the tool of general comments to explain better or to encourage cities to cooperate with CEDAW and to work with them? How can you do that from your seat as a global, basically, treaty monitoring body?
Thank you very much.
You can.
Actually, the process of engaging with the Cities for CEDAW project has evolved into that, is that our continued engagement, the presence of the chair it went global, the presence of the chair and me as a chair of a working group and former vice chair of the committee, being present in Cardiff, are all signals that the committee already has embraced this model. And we've actually started in our dialogues with state parties, presenting to them this as a model worthy of emulation. And a good case in study is like the Czech Republic. We engaged with them at this recent 92nd session, and they had a law actually mandating, they had an act on municipality mainstreaming of gender, which would in essence be a Cities for CEDAW, but they had no indicators, and there was no single municipal government that had undertaken any implementation of that act. And so we've recommended that in their concluding observation, which is what it provides us to recommend to state parties models that are workable. Second is outside of the UN member states, Taiwan, a non-state party to the UN, is also in the wings of, signing up to be a Global Cities for CEDAW member. Actually, the second city joining on, working with the Futures Project, I think Taipei, now Taoyuan. And this is because Taiwan has developed a CEDAW independent monitoring and review model that is also worthy of emulation by other state parties. Is that internal self-assessment and self-evaluation is also critical, that you can actually see the progress that you're making towards reporting to the committee. And therefore, when you meet with the committee and as we engage with you, it's much easier in the dialogue with civil society, with the private sector, or with the state party itself, elaborating on those models, critiquing the progress becomes much easier. And with indicators from DECIDE, it's just integrating that, because the CEDAW indicators are very clear for each article of the convention. Question is, what mechanisms and legal framework exist at the local level that will make this accessible, functional, and practical for women without needing to take on the burden of approaching higher level authorities, administrative offices, or judicial settings? Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Sunyoung, you want to react to that? And I think it will be the final comment.
Well, I was reminded in looking at the evolution of different jurisdictions, how politics changes. And therefore, the extreme importance of law and of something like law that works and is built in, because future generations, which I know that Cardiff has paid a lot of attention to the Declaration on Future Generations, will benefit from what we do now. And if those things are not in place, they cannot draw upon this history. And we have seen mayors change, we have seen city council, we have seen federal governments change. And so that legal protection is something that we really need to aim for. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all our speakers for sharing your perspective, your views, your work on implementing CEDAW at the local level, on developing indicators, on making sure that all those experiences are somehow registered somewhere, so that we don't need to reinvent the wheel each time, but we have precedents, we have experiences that are useful to replicate, to scale up in other parts of the world. I really would like to emphasize that the Cities for CEDAW, as I think Esther or Sunyoung mentioned, is a model that hopefully will be replicated for other treaty bodies, for other core conventions of the UN, because I think it's not only about gender equality, but that could certainly be applied to other core human rights treaties, such as those dedicated to children, such as those on civil and political rights, on economic, social, cultural rights, in particular, where cities provide municipal services, especially in the field of economic, social, cultural rights. So it's a model that hopefully will be replicated. We'll follow this very closely at the Global Cities Hub. Also, just to recall, indeed, that there's a lot of politics involved in making sure that we embrace gender equality, that we make this a political priority, but there's also the importance of it becoming institutionalized at the local subnational level with binding laws. This has been re-emphasized several times by our very distinguished speakers. It's not only about advocacy and commitments, but making it very concrete with those judicial instruments. Thank you so much for your attention. We will be, publishing a news, publishing all the different presentations, work that have been presented during this webinar. So bear with us. Thank you so much. Please join the Cities for CEDAW campaign, either as a city or region, or if you are an NGO, a grassroots organization, please talk to your municipal, regional authorities and encourage them to join that campaign, because it does make a difference to the lives of women and girls in your territory. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to all speakers, and see you.